Welcome to Twilight Fables. Tonight, we drift gently into the southern lands of ancient China, where rivers move slowly through the earth and morning mist rises in soft silence. In a place shaped by water, patience and quiet strength, a young woman once walked paths that did not seek to confine her. Her name was Sun Shangxiang, though at this time she was not yet a name carried between kingdoms or spoken in distant halls. She was simply a daughter of the south. The mornings in Jiangdong arrived without urgency. A pale mist would settle along the riverbanks, drifting across tiled rooftops and narrow stone paths before lifting slowly into the air. Within the walls of a great household, the day began in near silence. Servants moved with quiet familiarity, doors sliding open with softened sounds, footsteps passing like distant echoes. Somewhere beyond the inner courtyards, there were faint rhythms that carried through the air, measured, steady, almost like breathing. But they never disturbed the calm. Everything existed in balance, as though each part of the world understood its place without needing to be reminded. It was within this stillness that she grew. Her family held influence across the southern lands, their decisions shaping movements far beyond what could be seen from within the estate walls. Among them was her brother, Sun Quan, whose path would one day lead him to guide the future of an entire region. Yet within the boundaries of home, those responsibilities did not press heavily upon her. They existed, certainly, but like distant mountains on the horizon, visible, steady, and unmoving. She did not resist the life around her, nor did she rush to define herself within it. Instead, she moved quietly through it, observing more than speaking, noticing more than reacting. There were gardens tucked within the estate where the stone paths softened under layers of moss, and the air carried the faint scent of cedar and water. These were the places she returned to, not out of escape, but out of preference. A hand might brush lightly against a passing branch, or pause briefly above the surface of a pond where koi drifted in slow, unhurried patterns. The world in these spaces asked nothing of her, and in return, she offered nothing but presence. In time, others would come to describe her as strong-willed, perhaps even unrestrained. But strength rarely begins as something loud or defiant. More often, it takes shape in quiet moments, in the way a person stands within themselves, without needing to prove it. There was a steadiness in her that did not seek recognition, something calm and grounded that existed long before it would ever be tested by the world beyond Jiangdong. At times, the faint sounds of distant training would reach the edges of the garden. The controlled rhythm of movement, the quiet repetition of discipline carried on the wind, rising and falling before disappearing once more into silence. She would pause when she heard it, not out of curiosity, but with a quiet sense of familiarity, as though the rhythm itself was something she understood without needing to see it. Then, just as gently, she would continue walking, the moment passing without interruption. The days moved in this way, unmarked by urgency or expectation. Light would shift slowly across the ground, shadows lengthening and fading as the sun rose and settled again. Nothing demanded her attention, and so she gave her attention only to what was present in front of her. There was a simplicity to this life, not because it lacked importance, but because it had not yet asked her to carry it. Beyond the rivers and hills of the south, the world was already beginning to change. Movements were unfolding, alliances forming and breaking, paths crossing in ways that would shape the years to come. But here, within the quiet boundaries of her early life, those changes had not yet arrived. They remained distant, like a current beneath still water, unseen, but always moving. For now, she remained where she was, a daughter of the Southlands, walking slowly through a world that had not yet asked her to leave. And as the morning mist lifted and the light settled gently across the earth, her footsteps continued, steady and unhurried, guided not by expectation, but by something quieter, something entirely her own. As the days passed in quiet repetition, there were subtle ways in which Sun Shangxiang began to move differently from those around her. It was not something openly spoken about, nor something that drew immediate attention, but rather a quiet distinction that revealed itself in small, consistent moments. While others followed the expected rhythms of the household with careful precision, she seemed to walk alongside those rhythms, instead of within them, aware of them, but never fully shaped by them. There were areas of the estate that carried a different kind of stillness, places where the air felt more open and the sounds less contained. Near the outer courtyards, where the stone paths widened and the trees grew taller, the faint echoes of structured movement could sometimes be felt rather than heard. It was here that discipline took form, not as something loud or forceful, but as something measured and repeated, like a quiet language spoken through motion. Though she did not stand among them, there was a natural understanding in the way she paused at the edges, as if recognizing that rhythm without needing to step into it directly. She did not seek permission to be who she was, and yet she did not challenge the world around her either. There was no defiance in her actions, only a quiet certainty that guided her without explanation. When she walked, it was without hesitation. When she stopped, it was without reason that needed to be spoken aloud. Those who observed her might not have understood it fully, but they could sense it. The feeling that she was not confined by the same invisible boundaries that shaped others. In the early hours, when the air was still cool and the estate had not yet fully awakened, she would sometimes take paths that led beyond the inner gardens, toward places where the land opened slightly and the horizon stretched just a little further. The ground there felt different beneath her steps, less worn, less defined, as though fewer people had passed through it with intention. It was not that she was searching for something new, but rather that she was comfortable existing where things were not already decided. The world around her remained steady, yet she experienced it with a sense of quiet expansion. A breeze moving through the trees was not simply a passing moment, but something to be felt and understood in its simplicity. The shifting of light through the branches, the soft sounds carried across distance. These became part of her awareness in a way that required no effort. She was not trying to hold on to these moments, nor was she letting them pass unnoticed. She simply allowed them to exist as they were, and in doing so, she remained present within them. There were times when the responsibilities of her family would draw closer, not directly placed upon her, but present enough to be felt. Conversations carried in low voices, decisions made behind closed doors, the quiet movement of messengers arriving and departing. These things were part of the world she belonged to, and yet they never seemed to define her entirely. They moved around her, like currents that did not pull her under, but instead passed gently by. Among those who shared her world, expectations were often shaped by tradition, by the roles that had been understood long before any of them had taken their place within them. But in her, there was something that existed just slightly outside of those expectations. Not in opposition, but in quiet independence. She understood the structure of the life around her, yet she did not allow it to narrow the way she experienced it. This quiet independence would later be remembered in different ways, described through the lens of those who encountered her as something unusual, perhaps even difficult to define. But in these early moments, it was simply part of who she was, something natural and unforced, like the way the river continued to move regardless of who stood beside it. As the sun rose higher and the day settled into its familiar pace, she would return once more to the inner spaces of the estate, not because she was called back, but because she chose to. There was no resistance in her movement, no sense of leaving something behind or stepping into something else. It was all part of the same quiet experience, the same unfolding path that required no urgency. In time, the world would begin to place meaning upon these quiet differences, shaping them into something larger, something tied to events and decisions far beyond these early days. But for now, they remained simple, almost unnoticed, woven gently into the rhythm of her life. She was neither separate from the world around her, nor entirely defined by it. She existed in a space that allowed both to be true at once, moving steadily forward without needing to declare where that path would lead. There came a time when the quiet rhythm of Sun Shangxiang's life began to shift, not suddenly and not with disruption, but with the steady, almost imperceptible change that moves beneath the surface before it is ever seen. The world beyond Jiangdong, once distant and indistinct, was drawing closer. Its presence carried through hushed conversations, longer journeys, and the subtle weight of decisions made by those around her. It was not something she resisted, nor something she fully embraced. It was simply something that arrived, as all things eventually do. The rivers that had once marked the edges of her world would soon become paths leading away from it. Preparations unfolded quietly, without spectacle, as though even this moment of change understood the need for calm. There were no dramatic farewells, no final moments shaped by urgency. Instead, there was a stillness that settled over everything, a quiet acknowledgement that something was ending, even as something else began. Her marriage was arranged as part of a greater alignment between lands that had long stood apart. It was a union not born from personal desire, but from necessity, from the careful balancing of relationships that extended far beyond any one individual. The man she would join her life with was Liu Bei, a figure already shaped by years of movement, responsibility, and quiet endurance. His name carried its own weight, just as hers did, and between them existed a space that neither rushed to fill. The journey from the south unfolded slowly, carried along waterways that stretched beyond the horizon. The familiar landscapes of Jiangdong gave way to new terrain, unfamiliar yet steady in its own way. The sound of water against the vessel, the shifting light across distant hills, the quiet passage of time marked not by events, but by distance. She did not look back often, not out of detachment, but because there was no need to hold on to what had already become part of her. There was a calm in the way she moved through this transition, a quiet acceptance that did not seek to question what could not be changed. Yet beneath that calm was something more difficult to name, a subtle awareness of the space she now occupied between two worlds. The home she had known remained behind her, while the life ahead had not yet fully taken shape. She existed in the in-between, where identity is not lost but gently reformed. When she arrived, the world around her felt different, not in a way that demanded attention, but in the way unfamiliar spaces carry a different kind of silence. The air, the architecture, even the rhythm of daily life held a tone that she had not known before. It was neither uncomfortable nor welcoming. It simply was, and she moved within it as she always had, observing, adjusting, allowing herself to settle without forcing the process. Her first moments with Liu Bei were not marked by grand gestures or emotional declarations. Instead, they were defined by a quiet recognition of presence. Two individuals shaped by different paths, now brought together by forces larger than themselves. There was respect in the way they regarded one another, a calm understanding that did not require words to establish. They did not rush to bridge the distance between them, nor did they allow it to become a barrier. They simply existed within it, letting time unfold as it would. In the days that followed, her life took on a new rhythm, one that was less familiar, yet not entirely separate from what she had known before. The stillness she had carried with her remained unchanged, even as the world around her shifted. She continued to move quietly through her surroundings, noticing the small details, the subtle changes, the way light settled differently across new spaces. Yet beneath the surface of this calm, there was a gentle awareness that her life was no longer contained within a single place. She had become part of something that extended beyond her own experience, something shaped by alliances, decisions, and the quiet unfolding of history. It did not weigh heavily on her, but it was there, present in the background like a distant current, and still, she remained herself, not defined entirely by her role, nor separated from it. She existed in that delicate balance, where identity is neither held too tightly, nor allowed to drift away. As the days continued, and the unfamiliar slowly became known, she did not force belonging. She allowed it to arrive in its own time, just as everything else had. In the days that followed her arrival, life settled into a rhythm that was neither unfamiliar nor entirely her own. The halls she walked were quieter in a different way, their stillness shaped not by the open air of Jiangdong, but by enclosed spaces that held their silence within walls and corridors. The light filtered differently here, softer in some places, more distant in others, as though it too had traveled far to arrive. Within this new setting, Sun Shangxiang moved as she always had, not with urgency, but with quiet awareness, allowing each moment to unfold without resistance. Her life beside Liu Bei was not defined by closeness in the way others might expect, nor by distance in a way that created tension. Instead, it existed in a space between, where understanding did not rely on constant words or gestures. They shared a presence shaped by mutual recognition, each aware of the path the other had walked and the responsibilities that continued to guide them forward. There was respect in that awareness, something steady and unspoken, like a foundation that did not need to be examined in order to remain strong. At times, their worlds would overlap in small, quiet ways, a shared moment in a garden where neither felt the need to speak, or the brief passing of one another in a corridor where a simple acknowledgement was enough. These were not moments of distance, but of a different kind of closeness, one that did not seek to fill silence, but allowed it to exist comfortably between them. In this way, their connection was not something that demanded attention, but something that remained present without effort. Beyond these moments, their lives continued along their own paths. Liu Bei's responsibilities often carried him elsewhere, his presence shifting between places as the world around them continued to move. When he was away, the quiet of the residence deepened, settling into a stillness that felt both empty and complete at once. For Sun Shangxiang, this stillness was not unfamiliar. It resembled the quiet she had always known, though it now carried a different tone, shaped by absence rather than solitude. She did not seek to fill that absence. Instead, she allowed it to exist as it was, just as she had allowed every other part of her life to unfold without force. In the spaces left behind, she returned to what had always grounded her: gardens, open courtyards, places where the air could move freely and the world felt less contained. Here, she found a sense of continuity, a quiet reminder that while her surroundings had changed, something within her had not. There were moments, however subtle, when the weight of the world beyond these walls would make itself known, not through loud declarations or visible strain, but through the quiet shift in atmosphere, the sense that decisions were being made, paths chosen, directions set. These were not things she needed to witness directly to understand. They moved through the environment, carried in the stillness, present even when unseen. In these moments, she remained steady, not detached, but not overwhelmed. She existed alongside these currents, aware of them, without being pulled beneath their surface. Her role, though defined by others, did not fully contain her. She continued to observe, to move, to exist within her own quiet understanding of the world around her. As time passed, the distinction between what was familiar and what was not began to soften. The halls no longer felt distant, the spaces no longer entirely new. Yet there remained a quiet awareness that this place was not where her roots had first taken hold. It was a place she inhabited, not one that had shaped her from the beginning. That understanding did not create conflict, but it did create a gentle distance, something that existed without needing to be resolved. And so, her life continued in this balance, between presence and absence, between connection and solitude, between the life she had known and the one she now walked through. There was no urgency to change it, no need to define it beyond what it already was. It simply existed, steady and unspoken, carried forward one quiet moment at a time. As the seasons shifted, there came a quiet awareness that Sun Shangxiang no longer belonged entirely to one place. The land she now walked carried its own rhythms, its own stillness, and yet beneath that calm was a subtle sense of distance, like standing beside a river that flows in two directions at once. Her presence, though steady, existed between worlds that did not fully meet. Beyond the walls, the wider landscape of the three kingdoms continued its slow and constant movement. Alliances were formed and reconsidered, paths crossed and separated, and decisions made in distant halls carried their influence across great stretches of land. These were not events that arrived loudly, but rather like shifting weather, felt gradually, noticed in small changes before they were ever fully understood. Within this quiet unfolding, her place remained unchanged on the surface, yet shaped by forces that extended far beyond what could be seen. Her connection to the south, to the lands ruled by her brother Sun Quan, was never something that faded. It existed within her not as longing, but as something that is steady and rooted, like the memory of a place that continues to live quietly within the body. At the same time, her life beside Liu Bei placed her within another world, one defined by its own direction and purpose. Between these two realities, she did not choose one over the other. Instead, she carried both, allowing them to exist side by side without forcing resolution. There were moments when this balance revealed itself more clearly. A letter received, its contents measured and deliberate, carrying with it the quiet weight of connection across distance. A message sent, composed with care, yet never rushed, as though the act of writing itself required a kind of stillness. These exchanges did not disrupt her calm, but they did remind her of the threads that continued to link her to places beyond her immediate surroundings. Even in silence, those connections remained present, in the way certain thoughts would surface without invitation, or in the way a familiar memory would return without needing to be called upon. These were not distractions, but part of the quiet continuity of her life. The understanding that where she had come from and where she now stood were not separate, but gently intertwined. The world around her continued to move, though always at a distance from her immediate experience. There was no need for her to step into its center, no expectation that she must shape it directly. Her role, though defined by circumstance, did not demand constant action. Instead, it existed in the background, influencing without overwhelming, present without pressing forward. In this space between two kingdoms, she found a kind of stillness that was different from the one she had known before. It was not the stillness of solitude, nor the stillness of familiarity, but something more complex, something shaped by awareness. She understood now that life could hold multiple truths at once, that belonging did not always require a single place, and that identity could remain steady even when everything around it shifted. As the days passed, this understanding settled quietly within her. There was no need to resolve the distance she carried, no need to choose between what had been and what now was. She moved forward as she always had, not seeking to define her place too clearly, but allowing it to exist as it was, fluid and unspoken. And in that quiet balance, she remained steady, her presence unchanged even as the world continued to move around her, shaping paths that stretched far beyond what could be seen, yet never pulling her away from the stillness she carried within. In time, the quiet balance that Sun Shangxiang had carried within her began to shift once more, not in a way that disrupted her, but in the same steady manner that had guided each change before it. The world around her continued to move along its unseen current, and with it came a moment where the path she walked beside Liu Bei began, gently and without resistance, to turn in a different direction. There was no single moment that marked this change, no clear beginning or ending that could be held onto. Instead, it unfolded gradually, like the slow drifting of water returning to its source. The spaces she had come to know began to feel lighter, less anchored to her presence, as though they understood that her time within them was no longer meant to remain unchanged. It was not a loss, nor something to be held with regret. It was simply the quiet recognition that her place, once again, was shifting. The journey that followed carried a familiar stillness. The same rivers that had once taken her away now seemed to guide her back, their movement unchanged, their rhythm steady beneath the surface. As the land unfolded before her, there was no sense of returning to what had been, but rather of arriving somewhere that had always remained part of her, even in absence. When the southern lands came into view once more, they did not feel distant or new. They felt known, not because they had remained the same, but because she had carried them within her all along. The air, the light, the quiet presence of the rivers and hills, all of it settled around her with a calm familiarity that asked nothing of her and required no adjustment. Her life there did not return to what it had once been. Time had moved, as it always does, and the world around her had continued to change in ways both seen and unseen. Yet within that change, she found a stillness that was deeper than before. It was no longer the stillness of early days, untouched by the world beyond, but one shaped by experience, by distance, by the quiet understanding of what it means to belong in more than one place and at once. There were no efforts to reclaim what had passed, no need to revisit what had already settled into memory. Instead, she moved forward with the same quiet presence that had always guided her, allowing each day to unfold without force. The gardens she walked, the paths she followed, the spaces she returned to, all carried a sense of continuity, not because they had remained unchanged, but because she had. The connections she had formed, the life she had stepped into and then gently stepped away from, did not fade. They remained within her, not as something to hold on to, but as something that had already become part of her path. There was no separation between what had been and what now was, only a quiet merging of both. In this return, there was no finality, no sense of conclusion, only a soft settling, like the evening light resting across still water. The world continued to move beyond her, as it always had, but within her there was a calm that did not shift, a steady presence that remained untouched by distance or time. And so, she returned not to a place, but to a state of being that had always been her own, carrying with her the quiet understanding that no matter where the path had led, or where it might continue, she had never truly been separate from it. As the years continued their quiet passage, the life of Sun Shangxiang settled into something even more subtle, something less defined by place and more by presence. The world around her, once filled with distant movements and shifting paths, seemed to grow quieter. Not because those movements had ceased, but because they no longer needed to reach her in the same way. What had once been carried through messages, journeys, and quiet transitions now softened into memory, into something that existed without needing to be followed. The days unfolded with a gentle consistency. Morning light would return as it always had, brushing softly across familiar paths, touching the leaves, the water, the quiet corners of the world she walked through. There was no urgency in these moments, no sense that time needed to be held or measured. It simply moved, steady and unbroken, carrying everything forward without asking anything in return. In this stillness, her life became less about where she stood and more about what remained within her. The strength that had once been observed by others, the quiet independence that had shaped her early years, the understanding she had carried between two worlds, all of it remained, though now without the need to be seen or defined. It existed as something complete, something that no longer required movement to give it meaning. Those who remembered her might have spoken her name in different ways, recalling the roles she had once held, the place she had occupied within a time shaped by great change. They may have remembered her as a daughter of the South, as one who had walked between lands, as someone connected to figures whose names would carry far beyond their own lifetimes. Among them was Liu Bei, whose path had once crossed with hers, their lives briefly aligned within the quiet space of shared understanding. Yet even these connections, significant as they were, did not fully contain her story, because her life was not defined by those moments alone. It was found in the spaces between them, in the quiet ways she moved through the world, in the stillness she carried regardless of where she stood. It was in the way she did not resist change, nor cling to what had passed, but allowed everything to unfold as it was meant to, without force, without hesitation. And so, when the time came for her presence to gently fade from the world, it did not arrive with heaviness or finality. There was no moment that needed to be marked, no single point where everything ended. Instead, it was like the gradual quieting of a breeze at dusk, something that becomes softer and softer until it is no longer felt, yet never truly gone. What remained was not an ending, but a continuation, carried not through events or records, but through the quiet impression of a life lived without resistance, a life that moved gently through change, that held strength without needing to show it, that existed fully within each moment without trying to shape it into something more. The gardens, the rivers, the open spaces she once walked did not hold on to her. And yet, in some quiet way, they still carried the memory of her presence, not as something visible, but as something felt, like the stillness that lingers long after the world has grown quiet. And so, her name did not fade. It drifted softly, carried like wind across distant places, touching briefly before continuing on, never needing to settle in one place for too long. A daughter of the Southlands. As the story of Sun Shangxiang comes to rest, let your thoughts settle with it, gently and without effort. Her life, carried quietly between two worlds, reminds us that not all strength needs to be seen, and not all journeys need to be defined by their destination. In the stillness she leaves behind, there is nothing to hold on to, and nothing to let go of. Only the quiet sense that everything has unfolded as it was meant to. As the night deepens and the world grows softer, allow yourself to drift just as gently, carried by the same calm presence that guided her path. And when the story fades completely into silence, know that you are exactly where you need to be,